We are going to introduce our guest for the hour. Scott Ritter is a one-time Marine intelligence officer who served in the former Soviet Union, implementing arms control agreements, and from 1991 until 1998, he served as a chief inspector for the United Nations in Iraq, leading the search for Iraq's prescribed weapons of mass destruction. He was later a vocal critic of the American decision to go to war with Iraq. He is also the author of 9 books, including his latest, Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, Arms Control, and the End of the Soviet Union. Pleasure to welcome Scott Ritter. Scott, great to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Hey, Scott, Absolutely. How are you, man?
Hey, Russell, how you doing?
Good.
Yes, you're in my neck of the woods. I'm in the capital region, so are you. So I hope you're enjoying the moderate weather today up here. Great to talk to you. I would say it's ideal circumstances, but I guess that means it's less than ideal circumstances given the events of the past 24 hours. So we're, of course, here to talk primarily about Biden's recent authorization of long-range missile strikes deep inside Russian territory. But before we get into that, I'd like to go back in time a couple of months when you spoke at a peace and freedom rally in Kingston, New York, which I actually was at. We talked for a brief couple of minutes, and then I actually filmed this speech we're about to play an excerpt of in just a moment, because you spoke about how close we came to a potential nuclear war at the time when Biden almost authorized an extremely reckless escalation, similar, I suppose, in kind to the one that he just did. So here is a brief excerpt of the speech that you made in Kingston, New York, just a couple months ago.
I want to put you on notice that, and not too many Americans recognize this, on September 14th, the world almost ended. I don't know what you were doing on Saturday, September 14th. I don't know what you were doing with your lives. Hopefully it was a nice day. You're out enjoying it. But are you aware that a politician in Washington, D.C. almost signed his name to a piece of paper? That politician's name is Joe Biden. He is the President of the United States. Had he signed his name to that piece of paper, the British government, which brought that, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, would have worked with the Ukrainian government to take Storm Shadow cruise missiles, target them with intelligence prepared by the United States of America, loaded into these missiles with British hands, then put on Ukrainian aircraft to fire against Russian targets. This would have been an act of war by Britain and the United States against Russia. An act of war that would have prompted an immediate Russian retaliation that would have gone outside of the borders of Ukraine, striking targets in the United Kingdom and the United States. Now, this would not have been a nuclear attack yet, but it would have been a very serious strike, one that would have prompted the United States and NATO to strike Russia back in turn with conventional weapons, but this would have been a strategic strike, one designed to take out command and control, logistics, strategic nuclear capability. And this would have prompted a Russian nuclear retaliation by doctrine, which in turn would have prompted an American nuclear retaliation. And 72 minutes after this nuclear exchange began, we'd all be dead. The world would be over. This almost happened. This isn't a joke, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a drill. This is reality. This is what's happening right now. The United States government is considering signing these documents still because there are people in the U.S. government that think the Russians are bluffing. Did we, the people, empower our elected representatives to play Russian roulette with our lives? Because that's what they're doing. But this is Russian roulette where the gun is loaded, fully loaded. Every time you pull the trigger, you will die. This is the reality. It's not one that I'm happy about.
So, that was an outdoor event at a pretty busy intersection, and I remember just being in the audience. People were quite spellbound by that. They were quite disturbed by that, and, you went on to describe in that speech how Biden was ultimately persuaded to back down that time. And you also described in very chilling and disturbing detail what may have happened if he hadn't. So would you like to relay that message to the audience here to sort of set the stage for how urgent this is?
Well, I think most people, when they think of nuclear war, think of the experiences that history provides us. That is, first of all, the United States is the only nation to have used nuclear weapons against other nations. We dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II, one on Nagasaki, one on Hiroshima. And these inflicted devastating casualties on the Japanese, so much so that it, even though the Japanese were moving in the direction of surrendering, it immediately broke the spirit, and the emperor said, "We're done. It's over, finished." But we take a look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and yes, it was devastating. But I mean, what I hear a lot of people say is, "But Scott, the people are living there today. The cities have been rebuilt. Didn't they firebomb Dresden? Didn't they firebomb Tokyo, Hamburg, Berlin? I mean, other cities suffered more casualties than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Are we making, a big deal out of nothing? Is this something that really we need to worry about? Yes, it's devastating, but it's not something that, clearly Japan has come back from it. Couldn't we? And the point I want to make is that the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima was a 12 kiloton bomb. That's 12,000 tons of TNT equivalent. The radiation was considerable. People did die of radiation poisoning, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands. Tens of thousands of people died immediately from the effect. The fallout it haunts Japan to this day. But it was only 12 kilotons. The Nagasaki bomb was a little bit bigger, 15, maybe 20, different design, plutonium design. It killed similar amounts of people, similar amounts of radiation. If we go to war with Russia, thousands of nuclear weapons will hit the United States, averaging 500 kilotons each. Some will be up to 1 megaton in size. Some will be 750 kilotons, but the average size of the warhead will be about 500 kilotons. I'm not much of a mathematician, but that's a lot bigger than 14 or 15 kilotons.
Yeah, that's what Donald Trump would say. Not good. Believe me, not good.
It's not good. When it goes off, I don't know, where do most people live? I live in Delmar, New York, small little town of Bethlehem, small little town. If this weapon went off over 4 corners, 10 miles to each side would immediately vaporize, 100 million plus degree temperature instantaneously. Everything disappears, everything that quick. And then the shock wave goes out even more. And flattens everything, and the heat continues to come out. Fires will build up, but the damage is going to be done because the bomb is going to be an air burst, and so that means it's going to burst out but come down. When it comes down, it's going to churn into the ground, and it's going to suck everything that just got vaporized up into the air, and it's going to inject it up there into the jet stream. This is going to be highly radioactive material. It's now going to come into the jet stream and start moving downrange, spreading deadly radiation. Even the people that live, they're going to die because they're going to die of burns. They're going to die of immediate radiation. I'm talking about as they walk, within minutes, their organs will liquefy. You want to die in a nice way? Try having your organs liquefy on you. Other people won't be so lucky. They're going to live another day or two before their organs liquefy. If you guys want to know what I'm talking about, go. HBO did a series on Chernobyl, and the Soviet firefighters that responded initially Very brave men, didn't know what they were getting into, but they went in there and they got sick. And they tell the story of the wife of one of the firefighters as she went to be with him. And you get to see what having your organs liquefy looks like, played out on TV. Of course, it's not real, it's theatrical, but it's horrible enough. And that's what's going to happen to millions of people. So basically, Del Mar's gone, town of Bethlehem's gone, city of Albany has been flattened, radioactive. The whole capital district is dead. Everybody here is dead. And that's just one weapon. But the Russians aren't going to hit us with one weapon. You see, this is going to be played out over and over and over again, thousands of times, each one injecting similar clouds of radioactive dust into the jet stream, darkening the skies. History shows us there's an Indonesian island with a volcano, Krakatoa. And I think sometime in the 19th century, 1880s or so, it erupted. It erupts with the force of one of these 1 megaton bombs. The ash that was injected in the sky darkened the globe for years to come. Temperatures dropped. In the United States, the sun was blotted out by this. So as these nuclear weapons go off, and they're going to go off not just here in the United States, killing everything, but also in Russia and China and everything around the world, all this highly radioactive dust will be injected, orders of magnitude more than what Krakatoa did, and we will be hit by something known as nuclear winter. Nuclear winter will kill everything that remains. Certain areas will immediately become ice fields, and they will remain ice fields for a decade. That means that the hundreds of millions of bodies of dead people, dead animals, dead biological masses will be covered with ice, frozen there. Now, this is important because 10 years from now, if you live, the world will thaw out, and you're going to have to deal with billions of rotting corpses that'll spread disease and everything. So as bad as your life was, if you even make it, it's going to be much worse as the world just becomes this giant, disgusting, open air pit of rotting flesh. But you're not going to make it that far, because how are you going to eat? There won't be any food. The water you're going to be drinking is going to be radioactive. What if I have a bunker? You're not going to make it. There's no bunker that's going to last 10 years. Something goes wrong. Nothing works for 10 years. The generator is going to give out. You're not going to have fuel. You're going to die. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no surviving a nuclear war. There's no surviving a nuclear war. You think you can go to Australia, you think you go to New Zealand, you won't survive it. Again, 1957, Neville Schutt wrote a book called On the Beach, made into a movie, 1959. Fantastic movie, remade later on, but I like the original. And it tells the stories of the Australians as they waited for the radioactive cloud to come their way. And it does come their way, and eventually everybody dies. A very sad story, very touching story, but the finality of all life on Earth because of a nuclear war. That's the direction we're heading right now. Okay. And when people say, well, Scott, aren't you, surely the Russians wouldn't do anything like this. Well, the Russians don't want to do anything like this, but this is an existential issue we're talking about here. We're talking about, first of all, how many Americans realize that the national security policy of the United States towards Russia is the strategic defeat of Russia? Today, right now, as we speak, the goal of the United States is the strategic defeat of Russia. Now, what does this mean? It means the collapse of Russia, the destruction of Russia, the end of Vladimir Putin's regime, the breakup of Russia. Okay, that's what strategic defeat means. That's the goal right now stated by the Biden administration. Our goal is to strategically defeat Russia. So therefore, Russia must evaluate everything the United States does within that framework. That this is about trying to kill Russia, not solve a problem in Ukraine, not do this, not to kill Russia. We are using the Ukrainian conflict to strategically defeat Russia. The Russians have said, we dodged a bullet back in September. You see, we were talking about allowing these missiles to be freed up to use. Now, just so people understand, these missiles that we're talking about aren't game changers. This isn't, technology that if unleashed by Ukraine, Russia loses the war. That's not what's at stake here. This is a matter that's even far worse. You see, Ukraine's already using ATACMS missiles. They're using them against Russian forces in the Donbass region, in Zaporizhia, in Kherson. They're using them to strike Crimea. And you're like, well, isn't that Russia? Well, these are Russian territories under dispute. And so Russia has given the West a pass, saying, all right, we're at war in these areas. You can use those weapons. We won't nuke you because these are areas. And Russia's winning. I mean, we were using ATACMS, we were using Storm Shadows. They're using the Scalp, which is the French version. And the Russians are winning. They've solved this all. So then the question is, well, why is it a big deal now than if they use it against the rest of Russia? Why would this suddenly bring about the end of the earth? Well, according to the reports, the Biden administration has approved these weapons to be used for now only in Kursk, which is not part of the disputed territories. Kursk is an oblast north of the Ukrainian province of Sumy, but it is without a doubt Russian territory. Earlier this year, the United States enabled Ukraine to invade Kursk. We provided them with the manpower, we trained the manpower, we gave them the equipment, we taught them the tactics, we provided them all of the new modern communications equipment so they could fight just like a NATO force would fight. And we sent a 30,000 strong NATO proxy into Russia. Just so people get it, again, this is as if Russia put together an army of, Latinos down in Mexico and sent 30,000 of them into California and occupied San Diego. Big deal. Occupied, Texas, came across the border, occupied parts of Texas, New Mexico, American states. It's a big deal. We invaded Russia and occupied a significant chunk of it. Right. So now the Russians are countering it. But we don't want Russia to kick the Ukrainians out before January 20th. You see, the Biden administration is trying to tie Donald Trump's hands. They're trying to create a situation where he can't resolve this conflict. He will be married to this conflict, stuck. In order to do that, you have to have the Ukrainians stay in Kursk and be caught up, because now when you talk about bringing an end to the conflict, you can't, the Russians will be like, well, we can't end the conflict if they're in Kursk. So the Russians won't be inclined to come about to an end, and it'll sabotage the Trump peace plan. This is the goal of the Biden administration. So again, just to put it in perspective, we invaded Russia with a proxy force, and now we want to give them long-range missile strike capability to defend the invaders. That's, again, the Russians providing the Mexicans with missiles to attack Texas. We wouldn't put up with it, and Russia's not putting up with it. The last time this was being discussed, Vladimir Putin on September 12th said, if this happens, then the United States, Great Britain, France will become active participants in the conflict, and we will treat them as such. And our response will be decisive. He also said that the decisions have already been made. There won't be any discussion. There won't be any phone calls. There won't be any warning, that the decisions have already been made. The orders have been given. So when this happens, the Russians will automatically respond. Apparently, Biden didn't believe him, because this was on the 12th. On the 13th, Starmer came in and they met. So the Russian ambassador to the United Nations gave a speech at the United Nations, just underscoring the seriousness of this, where he said, if Biden signs that document, he will be signing a declaration of war against Russia. If Biden signs that document, he'll be signing a declaration of war against Russia. Now, this caused people in the Biden administration to get a little nervous. So they called their people, because we don't talk to the Russians. That just shows how stupid everything is right now. Even during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
Jack Kennedy talked.
They had the hotline. Right?
They had the hotline. They had the back channel. They had all these things going. But this time, the administration had the former administration people call up Anatoly Antonov, the Russian ambassador to the United States, and ask him, is this serious? He said, not only is it serious, let me just make it one step clearer. The United States will not be hiding behind the Atlantic Ocean. That if they do this, our response will not be limited to Europe. we will strike the United States and we will use nuclear weapons. And they went, really? And he went, don't play with fire. You're going to get burned. And they called up Biden and went, you got to stop. So he did. Mm-hmm. Everything I just told you is in play today. Somehow, we have convinced ourselves, we, the Biden administration, the British, that the Russians are bluffing, that they're not going to do this, that if we could just limit this to Kursk, the Russians won't overreact. But this is a matter of principle. Again, we invaded Russia. We sent a NATO proxy that we trained, equipped, and directed to invade Russia, Russian territory. And now we're giving them the weapons that they're going to use to, defend this force from Russia reclaiming its territories. At the time when we have embarked on a policy that seeks the strategic defeat of Russia. I spoke to somebody today who sits with Vladimir Putin on a regular basis. And this is important because when you sit with somebody, it means you get to look in their eyes. You get to look at their body. I mean, you guys have done. You've interviewed people in person.
Sure.
It's a much greater impact to interview them in person because you see so much more. Mm-hmm. You look at the twitching. You look at the hands. You look at the facial tics. You look at when they're confident, when they're not confident, things like that. This guy has sat with the leader, including recently. And he said he's never seen a man more calm, at peace with the decisions that have been made, and ready to carry out the actions that are necessary. This is not a man who's bluffing. This is a man who's ready to do that which, in his opinion, must be done to save Russia. Now, there's one piece of good news that came out of this conversation.
Oh, thank God. I was about to say we should have booked Rob Schneider tonight.
Well, I'm sorry. There's one piece of good news.
I've been reading this. You were talking about this.
Yeah, that book scares the crap out of me, and that book is exactly what's about ready to happen.
It's pretty terrifying. It's pretty terrifying.
But the good news is, the man who makes the decisions in Russia is waiting for Biden to say something. See, he believes that this could be a information warfare game played by the New York Times. Remember, the Washington Post. So there's a time in the United States when we considered the New York Times, the Washington. I remember when I went to college, we were encouraged. I was encouraged as a history major and political science guy to subscribe, and I got the special college rate. Back then, you had the card with the punch holes, and you come in every morning like a dutiful kid to the bookstore and give them your card, and you click, and then you could pick up your two papers. And if it was in either the Washington Post or New York Times, you could cite it as a definitive source, footnote it. It was in the New York Times. It was in the Washington Post. It must be real. Well, the Washington Post, just a little while back, you remember they reported that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin spoke. They had a phone call, and Trump, threatened Putin, and Putin caved, and all this kind of stuff. Phone call never took place. They made it up. They literally made it up. Why? Because the Washington Post hates Donald Trump. The Washington Post is actively trying to sabotage the Trump transition, to put poison in the well between Trump and Russians and prevent any opportunity for betterment of relations. So they made a story up. The New York Times may have just made a story up because they didn't name their sources. These are two anonymous sources. We're talking about one of the most critical. And does the Biden administration, it doesn't have a history of making major decisions like this and letting unnamed people leak it to the New York Times, and that be the story. Today,
this is the headline we're talking about. Sorry to cut you off, but just so everybody knows, this is the headline, right? This was the report yesterday that you are talking about now, right? Yep.
And just so you know, that means according to the Russians, that's a declaration of war that will result in a Russian retaliatory strike of devastating consequences. I'll get into that in a second too.
No, you tweeted about this. I have your tweet to show you. In short, the U.S. is now at war with Russia. Now, you went on far beyond that in this tweet to talk about potential off-ramps, which I assume you might be getting into now.
Well, yeah. But I mean, an off-ramp depends on the journey that we're on. Are we on a journey to war made by the by the Biden administration, or are we on a journey of fabrication made up by the New York Times? Right now, the Russians are acting as if this is disinformation. They're ready in case it turns into reality, but the Russians aren't overreacting here. They're very calm, very. I wish I had spoken to them first because it would have calmed me down. Because I am still. Look, I was in the military. I know a thing or two about nuclear weapons and nuclear war planning, and I don't want my family to die this way. I don't care how I die. I mean, screw it. I'm 63 years old. I've had a good life. You know, if you want to take me, take me. But I don't want my family to die. I don't want my friends to die. I don't want this planet to die. I like Earth. I like America. I like the land we live in. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York High. I mean, come on, man. This is whatever you want to call God, whether you believe in God or you believe in Yahweh or you believe in trees. We've been blessed with the miracle of life, and it is a blessing. Now we've screwed it up over and over and over again, but normally when we screw it up, the miracle of life is we tend to recover. We can recover from most of our mistakes. We can't recover from nuclear war. It's over. So the Russians are relatively calm right now, but it's still not a time to mess around. I really do think the Trump administration needs to take the bull by the horns. And I'll tell you why. The Biden administration lost an election. The American people said no. So why in God's name will a president who has 2 months left make a decision that doesn't have to be made now? That America is not at threat. That's the other point I want to make. No one's threatening us. We're not at risk, guys. This is about Ukraine. And I don't care where you stand. I view them as a bunch of Nazis, Banderists who deserve everything they have coming to them. But you could be sitting there going, go Ukraine, support Ukraine, whatever. None of that means America's at risk. None of that means America's at risk. So why is this president now making a decision to put everything on the table? We're going to commit suicide for Ukraine. For Ukraine. Even if you love Ukraine, you can't support that. And yet that's the direction we're heading with 2 months to go in this old man's tenure. Donald Trump won the election, and he won it decisively. I say he has a mandate. Other people disagree with that. That's semantics. He thinks he has a mandate, and he's going to execute that mandate, and nothing's going to stop him. There's no way to stop him from doing what he's doing, unless you end the world first or tie his hands through a major war.
Well,
I really think Donald Trump should. I'll just say this real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
He really needs to go on record and say, I will be the president of the United States on January 20th. While I can't make policy right now and I can't negotiate, I will tell you the following. Ukraine, somebody may have given you a green light. My light's red and will always be red. And if you act on the green light of the man who will be out of office in 2 months, the man that's assuming office in 2 months will shut down aid for you permanently. You think you have troubles now, you will cease to exist as a nation state when I come in, if you do this. I'm telling you right flat out, you don't get to do this. If you do this, I will kill you. You don't have to worry about the Russians. Then I would turn to Great Britain and France and say, if you guys want to sign on to this, again, that's your thing. I'm not here negotiating you, but I will tell you this, on January 20th, you lose all American protection. I will literally tell the Russians to blow you off the face of the earth. Kill them all. We're not coming to their assistance because they're trying to kill us right now. You see, I'm taking this personally. I blame France and England for trying to start a war that's going to kill my family, destroy. If I were Trump, I'd take it personal too. They're trying to destroy everything you're trying to build by making something existential that is not the defense of Ukraine. Right. So he should just tell them, you're done. And I would also tell Mark Rutte, the new Secretary General of NATO, that on January 21st, he will cease being the Secretary General of NATO, and that NATO will cease to exist because the United States will pull the plug. We will get rid of this entity. You guys are trying to start a conflict with Russia that impacts us. That will not happen. Again, you can do anything you want between now and January 20th. I can't stop you, I being President Trump. But on January 20th, I can pull the plug on everything, and I will pull the plug on everything. And you have to keep that in mind when you start doing. He needs to go on record and say this, or else this is going to get out of control. Because we have New York Times line, Washington Post line, we have the Biden administration active, we have Europe, NATO, everybody conspiring to tie his hands up with Russia. And the other thing he would do is send a message to Russia. I wouldn't advise him talking directly to the Russians. Talk indirectly to the Russians and say, guys, you see the direction I want to go.
Isn't there the Logan Act issue there? Like he can't
Logan Act
really negotiate with them right now?
If you negotiate as a private citizen, you're look, if I were Trump, I'd be ballsy. Excuse my language. I don't know if what I'm allowed to say here, but I'd be aggressive.
That's pretty.
And,
pretty safe.
Yeah.
and understand that the Logan Act has never been successfully prosecuted, and some people think it's unconstitutional. But he is the president-elect. He's not your average private citizen. He was elected on a mandate of change, and we have a president who lost the election, trying to tie his hands by engaging in policies that aren't essential to us. So if I were him, I'd make the argument that, Biden, you screwed up. I'm negotiating. Pound sand. Department of Justice, come. I will tie you up in a court. I have a 7-2 Supreme Court right now. You ain't going to see the light of day until January 20th. And on January 21st, you cease to exist. So please send your guys in here. Try and prosecute me under Logan Act. And every swinging, that comes through the door will be unemployed on January 21st. That's what I would do if I were Donald Trump. Because, again, people would say, well, Scott, don't you believe in constitutional due process? I do. But I believe in life. And we're talking about nuclear war here. This is not something to play. Joe Biden has decided to, as I said in that speech, to play Russian roulette with our lives with a gun where every single chamber is loaded.